Hey friends, surprise! I'm back for two short bonus episodes this month. I know I was trying to take some time off from publishing anything else this year, but I guess I just missed you guys. So, if you're new here, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. I'm Claire Shorenstein, a sports dietitian and endurance athlete, and in every episode, I share evidence-based guidance and practical nutrition tips so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today, I'm covering a topic that comes up every single year with many of my clients, and that is off-season fueling. Off-season fueling feels a little tricky for a lot of athletes, and that's because you're not in a structured build and you may or may not be training consistently. And because of that, it's really easy to assume your nutrition doesn't matter as much. But here's the thing. Your off-season nutrition absolutely matters because, of course, your nutrition matters all the time. And during the off season, nutrition often is overlooked. And it's such a key opportunity to support your health and your recovery, and of course, your resilience as an athlete. So the plan for today, I'm going to walk you through the foundational nutrition strategies I teach my athletes in one-on-one coaching and in my monthly membership to fuel well during the off season without micromanaging every bite and without falling into the whole underfueling trap that so many people unintentionally slip into this time of year. And I realize I might be a little bit late with this topic for some of you because I know many of my clients and people I know, people in my membership, maybe you finished your big races earlier in the fall. So you might be weeks into your off season. You may even be starting your next training cycle, but I still wanted to talk about this topic anyway, because it's still relevant for some of you and it's always great to learn for next time. Plus, and perhaps most importantly, it's going to be a really great review of core fueling principles that are relevant year round. So even if you did not just have a big race, you are not officially in any type of off season right now, I think you're still going to get a lot out of this. So keep listening. Before we get into it, I do just want to let you know that I have a special sale going on now through December 20th on the Eat for Endurance shop page. I am offering 25% off my Boco Technical Trucker hat and 25% off my Fueling sticker pack. Plus, you get a free Make Carbs Great Again sticker with every hat or sticker purchase while supplies last. This is a really easy and fun way to support my work here on the podcast while also getting something for yourself or for a friend this holiday season. You can visit the shop page of eatforendurance.com and use code December25 at checkout. Again, December25 to get the deal. And of course, if you go to the page, you'll find that code there as well. All right, let's get into today's topic. So I always like to set the stage, as you guys know. So let's first start by defining what do we actually mean when we say off season. So this is a period of time that typically follows a big race or a training cycle. And it's really a time where training volume and intensity come down and the focus shifts more towards rest, recovery, and rebuilding. I assume you guys all know about this. Many of you are probably very familiar with this, but again, just want to state it just in case anyone is not familiar. And what this looks like will really depend on the individual. So depending on your training preferences, your sport, your schedule, a wide variety of other things, your off season might include some time completely off. I mean, I hope you're taking some time off right after a big race. Maybe you're cross training a bit more. Maybe you've added more strength work to address some weaknesses. Maybe you're just enjoying some really fun, unstructured movement. You're just really like leaning into what you feel like doing. You might be completely switching sports. You know, this is a big time for going into some winter sports, indoor sports. Or maybe you're continuing with your sport, just doing a much lower volume version of kind of what you normally do. But whatever you're doing, the key is this. Even during the off season, you're still an athlete, you're still a human being. None of that changes, obviously. And what that means is your nutrition still has a massive impact on a whole host of things going on. Your hormone health, your energy levels, your recovery, your readiness for your next training block, or if you don't have another race planned, whatever else is next. So really the off season is not the time to ignore your nutrition, as I was saying earlier, because what you do now directly influences how you feel once training ramps up again. And I'm talking about this so much because one of the biggest mistakes I see athletes making is thinking, oh, I'm not training as much, so I don't need to fuel as much. And yes, that can be true to an extent. Like, yes, your needs shift. It is true if your training is lower, but your body is still doing a ton of behind the scenes work during this time, especially if you're really like right off the bat of, coming off of a really heavy training cycle. That really is not the time to back off. You're repairing muscle tissue, you're replenishing depleted nutrients, you're supporting your hormones, you're maintaining immune function and bone health, etc. You're really rebuilding after months of training stress, and you're trying to prepare your body for what's next. And, underfueling in the off season, it's extremely common. Again, it can be very unintentional or intentional, and it can lead to fatigue and irritability, disrupted digestion, sleep issues, and overall like lower energy availability. So that's the exact opposite of what you want going into a new training cycle, right? So the goal here is really to kind of stick to the basics and maintain consistency with your fueling. And the real key here is matching it to how active you are. And we're going to talk about that in a sec. So what's really important as well, like this is something I want you to keep in mind, is your foundational fueling principles. They don't change just because you're in the off season. It's not like all of the rules suddenly change. Like, you're still functioning really within the same framework. We're just adjusting slightly because what you're doing is a little bit different, right? And so that makes sense. So I think it would be helpful to kind of go over, well, what does stay the same? What are these kind of core fueling principles I'm even talking about? So these are the things that stay the same year round. I want you to be eating every 2 to 4 hours or so, right? Ideally, you're starting to eat within an hour of waking. Like, I don't want you delaying meals too much. I don't want you training fasted. I've always talked about that. So that's something ideally you're not doing. You're trying to refuel in a timely fashion after exercise. So ideally within an hour. There's some flexibility there, but if we are trying to kind of maintain this kind of consistent eating schedule across the day and not fall too behind, just being mindful of the timing. Your meals should be balanced, with carbs and protein and fat. You should have color in those meals, so fruits and vegetables. Again, none of this is, should be like new, groundbreaking news here, right? This is all basic stuff. Your snacks should be, carbohydrate based, because we always want to have carbs everywhere. And you can add protein, fat, and or fiber for satiety, right? So that's important to help meet your needs. We want to hydrate consistently throughout the day. You don't want to be just chugging at the end of the day because you're behind. And of course, you're always scaling your portions, and especially your carbohydrates, based on your training load. So even if you're doing easier and shorter workouts, your body still needs stable, predictable energy. So again, nothing groundbreaking here, hopefully, for you guys. This is all kind of review, but it's worth repeating. I like repeating important messages. So let's talk about carbohydrates now, because this is, of course, the macronutrient that athletes tend to slash without realizing the consequences. So remember, your carb needs are always tied to your training volume, your training intensities, and your duration, as well as all your individual energy needs. So when we think like volume, intensity, duration, so as those things increase, carb needs increased. And I've gone over these guidelines before. They're all over my blogs, multiple blogs. I know I've talked about them multiple times all over the place on this podcast, but just as a reminder, the guidelines we normally use, it's 3 to 5 grams per kilogram for light training, or around 0 to 60 minutes per day. 5 to 7 grams per kilogram for more moderate training levels, 6 to 8 grams per kilogram for a higher volume or intensity, and 8 to 12 grams per kilogram per day is really for very high volume or carb loading. So not so much happening, I would think, in the off season, but I guess you never know. So I would say most endurance athletes, even in the off season, maybe they're falling somewhere in the 4 to 8 gram per kilogram per day range. Looking at my client load right now, I have clients who are putting in a few hours a week right now, and then I have others who are training like 8 to 12 hours a week, which is, quote, low for them, but everything is relative, right? So, and you can get more details, by the way. I break down those, all those different amounts even further on several of my blogs. So you can get more info on that if you want to go digging for it. But, what people often forget is that even with these lower training loads, carbs are still so important for a variety of things. Like, yes, carbs is important to fuel or exercise, but carbs are also supporting bone health, iron absorption, hormone function, digestion, brain function, energy levels, mood, recovery. I mean, so many things. So, in other words, you might be able to reduce the amount of carbs you're consuming if your overall physical activity is lower, but it's not like carbs become less important during the off season, right? We can't just suddenly stop thinking about them. If you're an active person, you should always be thinking about carbohydrate. So I think another thing people get confused about is okay, well, how do I figure out how much to eat? And again, this is a question I've talked about on the podcast before. And there are a lot of different ways of going about figuring this out. I've mentioned the athlete performance plate model before. That is a helpful model for some people. Other people, it doesn't really resonate well for them, which is totally fine. But if you're curious about the athlete performance plates, there are easy, moderate, hard, and very hard day plates. And you can get all the information. I have a blog post. It's called "How Much Do I Need to Eat in a how much, let me think about this for a minute. How much do I need to eat as an endurance athlete is what it's called. And it's one of my earlier blog posts, and you can go read that. It's a really great deep dive into the performance plates with lots of visuals and details, but it's also kind of like a nutrition 101, especially for endurance athletes. It gives lots of information on the macronutrients and some key guidelines and just things to consider. So go check that out if you feel like you need to learn a bit more about some of those basics and you're curious about performance plates. So that is a helpful visual tool. Along with that, we can also use gram per kilogram guidelines, much like what I was just mentioning with carbohydrates, but we can use those for different macronutrients to establish ranges. I love ranges. We always want to think in ranges because, maybe some days are a little bit lighter, some days a little heavier. And of course, we're not robots. We eat differently on different days. So ranges are great. Flexibility is great. And again, you can find all these, guidelines in this blog I just mentioned, but we're usually going for around 1.4 to 1.8 gram per kilogram per day of protein. The carb range I mentioned previously, so somewhere between 4 and 8 grams per kilogram, usually in the off season. And for fat, I'm usually doing at least 1 gram per kilogram per day. And that's largely based on how much energy you need. So we can kind of play around with these amounts. And the key here is I don't want you tracking macros every day. That's obviously a drag, but it can be useful to spot check and track just for a few days to get a sense of where you are right now, getting a baseline and where you might need to be. So it can kind of show you, oh, wow, okay, I'm only here and I have to work up to here. So we can kind of work through those kinds of things. And it can also be helpful to just learn some basic stuff to, that will allow you to visually estimate portions to reach your goals. Like, for instance, okay, a cup of any cooked grain or pasta is roughly 45 grams of carbs. We can learn some basics with food, not memorizing, the calorie and gram amounts for everything. No, definitely don't want you doing that. But we can just get a very, very general sense of a few basic things like, oh, wow, an egg has roughly 6 to 8 grams of protein, or, that kind of stuff, right? So just a few basic things for things that you frequently eat that can be helpful. And, before we dive into this further, I like to establish another framework. So again, there are lots of ways to learn. I always like to present multiple ways of learning because people things will click with different people and people are different types of learners. So if for whatever reason the performance plate, that's not for you, which I've had clients be like, yeah, I don't really like that. You can think of it a different way. So we can instead divide your day up into 3 fueling windows or buckets. So we think morning, midday, and evening. And the idea is that you're filling up these buckets as you go about your day. You're not trying to play catch up at night. You're not skipping or delaying breakfast. And of course, you're not relying on random snacks here and there throughout the day. We're really being okay, cool. In the morning, I need to reach roughly this amount, in the midday, this amount, and in the evening, this amount. And, you're ensuring essentially that each meal of your day includes a meaningful protein source, a carbohydrate source, some healthy fats, and, some color or fiber as tolerated, depending kind of the situation. And then, of course, you're adding whatever else you need to fill up those buckets via snacks. And to establish how much you need, well, essentially you would determine your daily target amounts for each macronutrient. You would divide by 3 to get rough amounts per bucket or whatever you want to call it. And then, on days you train more, you're increasing your carb portions, especially around your training. And on lower volume days, you might be going down. And I can give an example of what this looked like, because maybe me just talking about this is a little bit confusing without seeing visuals. But let's say your daily needs are roughly, like, let's say we calculate out your needs for the day. We divide it by 3, and each fueling bucket or window or whatever you want to call it, you need roughly like 35 to 45 grams of protein, 80 to 100 grams of carbs, and 20 to 25 grams of fat. So really, like, the main thing is here that you want to know is, well, how does that translate to food? Like, Claire, thanks for all those numbers. Like, that's not really helpful. What does this look like in food? Okay. And this is where it can be helpful to kind of have a very general sense of, oh, okay, if I have 6 ounces of chicken, beef, or fish, I am definitely going to, check that box of 35 to 45 grams of protein, right? Or even 5 ounces really could check that box. If I have a serving of Greek yogurt plus 3 eggs, that checks that box. Or maybe we're doing a cup of lentils plus a cup of whole grains plus some nuts or seeds and other little things to kind of fill in the gaps, because it's not quite getting up to there. For carbs, so my goal was 80 to 100 in this example. So if you do 2 cups of cooked grains or pasta, that's 90 grams right there. So easy peasy, right? And this is where just knowing, 1 cup of a cooked grain or pasta is roughly 45 grams. So this is where something like that could be handy. And maybe you're having a bagel and a banana and a juice, and that together will kind of hit your goal. So again, the goal, the idea here is not like, okay, we're counting all of the things, but it does help to have some familiarity with, what foods provide. And like a fat example, I forgot to give you a fat example. So maybe you're doing 2 or 3 eggs plus some avocado to hit that 20 to 25 gram goal, or you're doing a couple tablespoons of nut butter, or, plus a little bit of oil. Maybe you're doing olive oil, nuts, and seeds. The thing there to keep in mind with fat is like a teaspoon of an oil or butter, or 1 egg, that's roughly 5 grams. So again, like, do you need to memorize all this stuff? No, of course not. Like, you don't have to, but it does help to kind of just have a general sense of what foods provide. If you glance down at your plate and you only have 1 slice of toast, like, and then you have like a banana later, like, are you hitting your 100 gram carb goal? No, obviously not. So, just a general familiarity really can help. And then, I don't want you overthinking all of this, but, you can kind of think about, okay, how active am I? Do I need to add a 3rd cup of grains or pasta, or add fruit or juice or whatever, or do I need to scale down? That's kind of the idea there. All right, I just want to take a quick break to let you know that I am currently accepting new one-to-one clients to start in early January. I offer 3 and 6 month programs, and I only accept a limited number of clients to ensure that every person receives individualized attention and depth of support that is required to create lasting, meaningful change. I have tons of testimonials on my website if you're curious what my past clients have to say about our work together. And actually, I just got one a couple days ago from my client, Anna, and I wanted to quickly read it to you. She says, I decided to work one-to-one with Claire about 6 months ago, and it has been the best investment I have ever made. My skin is 100% clear. My hair is no longer falling out. My cycle length is just about perfect. I have no cramps. I also feel so much stronger during my workouts. But I have to say the best part of all is how much calmer I feel. I used to always feel so wound up and was constantly yelling at my kids. I am not just a better athlete, but also a better wife and mother, because I am nourished and I have Claire's knowledge and expertise to thank. I will just say I absolutely love watching my clients transform like this. It takes time, it takes a lot of work, but it's so worth it. So if you're interested in working together, my January spots are filling up. Head on over to the services page of eatforendurance.com. You can fill a new client inquiry form, and we can get you on my schedule for a free discovery call. All right, so now let's talk about fueling your workouts, because this is an area where athletes can sometimes also restrict during the off season, and that is a huge mistake. Maybe there's this thought, oh, okay, I'm like not racing, so I don't need as much. But the reality is that intra-workout fueling doesn't really change a whole lot, if at all. You still want to fuel adequately during any long session, i.e. anything over 75 minutes. Or during any high intensity sessions where you really could use a little bit of extra energy to kind of hit those goals. If you happen to be doing high intensity work, maybe you're not during the off season. So sports nutrition products like gels and chews and drinks, they're all still useful. They're convenient. They're effective. It is not the time to ditch them, but it is the time to experiment. So what's really awesome about this time period, this of the off season, is that stakes are incredibly low. Like, you can take a step back and think, okay, in my past training cycle, what went really well? What didn't go so well? What am I ready to leave behind? What do I want to take with me? And then you can start playing around with new products you might be curious about. Maybe there are different flavors you want to try. Maybe you're trying to increase your carb intake, gram per hour. Maybe you're playing with different hydration strategies. Maybe you didn't get around doing a sweat test and you want to play with that. Or maybe you're doing I've never tried caffeine before. I want to see what that's like. Maybe you're trying some different solid foods if you use them, or whatever else. There's lots of stuff you can play with, and it's a really low pressure environment. And that's awesome, because if something doesn't sit right, obviously it's never fun if you have GI issues or you hate something, but it's just a great opportunity to play and to experiment and to figure out what you want to bring with you or leave behind for the next training cycle. And the last thing I want to mention briefly that relates to off season is body composition work, because this comes up a lot around this time, and especially after the holidays. As you guys know, it's always the time where everyone wants to lose weight or get lean or all that stuff. So that's a very common request. I hear from people all the time with that stuff. So the first thing to note is that not everyone is going to be a good candidate to work on body composition goals. If you've been underfueling or overtraining, if your period is irregular, or if you're a man, if you have low testosterone or other kind of things going on there, if you're recovering from an injury, if you're showing any signs of low energy availability, and there's a whole long list, let me tell you, you can go back and listen to those episodes about REDS. Or if you struggle with disordered eating or an eating disorder, body recomposition work is an absolute no-go. Long-term health always matters more than short-term aesthetic and performance goals. So all that said, body recomposition work is best when training volume is a bit lower, because this minimizes risk, right, for low energy availability and injury and illness and all that stuff. It works best when you're healthy, you're eating consistent, balanced meals and snacks, which means following all those core nutrition principles I mentioned earlier. We're usually keeping protein quite high, usually higher than in your training cycle. So I had mentioned 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilogram previously. We're often starting at 1.6, going up to 2, maybe even higher grams per kilogram. So we want to keep that nice and high, especially if you have that caloric deficit going on to maintain lean body mass. We're always aiming for adequate fiber per day, and that's always important, but particularly in this type of work. So that's, around 30 grams per day for women and 40 grams per day for men. You're maintaining a very small caloric deficit, very small. Maybe it's 10 to 15% of your total daily intake max. And we're really aiming for very, very slow change over a set period of time. So you're not trying to lose weight forever. We have a very set period of time we're working on this because, it is a bit more focused work, and we don't want to be doing this forever. And chances are you have another big goal and a race or whatever, something you're kind of working on next. And I really don't want you skimping on your intra-workout fueling. So again, you're fueling before and after all workouts, and fueling during sessions when appropriate. I tend not to work on body comp during the chaotic holiday period, but some athletes like to focus on it before or after. Anyways, with all this, I'm barely scratching the surface here. You can get a ton more information on this particular topic in my recent podcast with dietitian Alex Larson. We get into it there. So to wrap up this mini episode, your off-season nutrition should not be an afterthought. It's really like a strategic window where you can take some time off for yourself to reset mentally and physically and set yourself up to feel awesome once training picks back up. This is really key to preventing that mental and physical burnout. Like no one likes to be in a position where you're like dreading workouts and you've lost your like the joy and you just like aren't having fun. I mean, we do this for fun. So if you're not having fun, like why are you doing this? Like something's off. So just kind of keep an eye on that. So just remembering that consistent fueling right now, it just makes such a world of difference right now and also later, right? So really staying on top of that. If you want a much, much deeper dive into this topic, plus holiday fueling strategies, I just uploaded my complete 45-minute masterclass recording for the Athlete's Guide to Off-Season and Holiday Fueling into my membership Fuel for Life crew. You can join for just $30 a month and get access to this workshop, all my other resources, including downloads and tons of other masterclasses, and best of all, well, maybe it's not best of all, but some people love it. Actually, a lot of people love it. You, of course, get direct support from me within our private Slack channel. It's a really fun group. We have about 20 people in there right now. It's awesome, and it's year-round. There's no commitment. You can try it for a month and cancel if it's not for you. You can kind of hop in and hop out whenever you feel like it. But I will tell you, prices are going up January 1st to $39 a month. So if you want to lock in that lower price, you can grab that now and you can get 3, 6, and 12-month membership at that lower price if you so choose. And if you're curious to learn more, I have a ton of testimonials from my Fuel for Life crew members on eatforendurance.com, and you can read more, of course, on that page all about it. And lastly, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure you follow, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I have part 2 coming out next week, so you'll be notified if you are following, subscribing when that comes out. I'd also be so grateful if you could share it on social media or with a friend and rate and review it wherever you get your shows. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you all next week for part 2 of my bonus episode where we'll dive into holiday fueling strategies. All right, thanks, guys.